Imagine that the world around you disappears in a single second. The deafening roar of explosions, the metallic scent of gunpowder, and the biting cold of the mud in the trenches become nothing more than a blurred background. In that precise instant, everything that exists is the face of a comrade, someone who fought by your side for months, who shared what little bread remained, and who whispered stories of home in the dark, passing away forever right before your eyes. Have you ever wondered what happens inside the human mind during such a devastating moment of loss, under the extreme pressure of a world war? War trauma is not just a deep emotional wound, it is an event that physically rewires the connections of our brain, changing how we perceive reality, danger, and even ourselves. Today, we're going to dive into the invisible backstage of the human mind to understand how the brain reacts to this impact and why the scars left by a battlefield can last a lifetime. World War II was a setting of unprecedented stress in modern history. Unlike the everyday tensions we face, such as a deadline at work or a family disagreement, war trauma is what we call a catastrophic and continuous trauma. Imagine living for months or even years in a state where death is a possibility every single second. When a soldier witnesses the loss of a combat partner, the biological impact is overwhelming. It isn't just sadness, it is a fundamental break in the sense of safety that the brain needs to function. Biologically, the brain enters a state of maximum alert that never relaxes. For the nervous system, the war is not an isolated event, but a new biological reality where danger is the only constant. This constant pressure alters the very architecture of our mind, transforming an organ designed for learning and connection into a machine focused purely on raw survival. To understand what happens in the brain during this trauma, think of your mind as a very well-organized city. In the center of this city, there is a control room responsible for logical thinking and calm decisions. But hidden in a deeper, more ancient area, there is an ultra-sensitive alarm system. When the soldier sees his companion fall, this alarm, which we call the amygdala, trips with full force. It's as if a giant bell begins to ring inside the head, silencing everything else. The amygdala is our fear center, and in war trauma, it becomes hyperactive. It begins to see threats everywhere, even where they do not exist. Meanwhile, the frontal part of the brain, which should calm this alarm and say that everything is okay, loses its strength. It's like the captain of a ship losing control to a panicked crew. At the same time, the memory center, known as the hippocampus, takes a hard hit. Instead of storing the memory of that moment as something that happened in the past, it ends up mixing everything together. This is why years later, the sound of a car backfiring can make a veteran feel like he's right back in that trench. For his brain, time stopped at that moment of loss. This physical change is accompanied by a literal chemical storm. When trauma occurs, the body is flooded with powerful chemicals like cortisol and adrenaline. In normal situations, these substances help us escape immediate danger, like a wild animal. But in war, the body produces these hormones in industrial quantities for days, weeks, and months. Cortisol, which is supposed to be a protector, becomes toxic to certain areas of the brain when present in excess. It begins to wear down the connections that allow us to feel joy or calm. Dopamine and serotonin, the chemical messengers of pleasure and well-being, end up in short supply, as if the brain's stock had been completely exhausted during the battle. The result of this is a state of constant hypervigilance. The soldier can no longer sleep because his body is chemically programmed to wait for the next attack. He feels anxious and has a persistent sense of danger because his internal chemical balance has been reset to crisis mode. The impact extends to the entire nervous system, which operates like the electrical wires connecting the brain to the body. There is a part of this system called the fight or flight system. At the moment of trauma, this system short circuits and gets stuck in the on position. Imagine a light switch that you can no longer turn off. The veteran's body continues to react as if the war is still happening all around him. His heart beats faster for any reason, breathing becomes shallow, and muscles remain tense, ready for action. Even decades after returning home, while sitting in his favorite armchair, his nervous system may still be sending signals that he needs to fight to survive. This happens because the body stores the memory of the trauma much more deeply than the conscious mind does. It's a biological protective response that unfortunately has become a prison. The body has learned that being relaxed is dangerous, and now it refuses to let its guard down, turning everyday life into an invisible battlefield. If these changes are not understood and cared for, the long-term consequences can be devastating to one's quality of life. A brain that has gone through such intense war trauma may begin to shut down. Often, to avoid the unbearable pain of loss, the mind creates a kind of emotional numbness. The veteran may find it difficult to connect with his children, his spouse, or his friends, not because he doesn't love them, but because his emotional system is exhausted and protected by an invisible armor. It is essential to understand with great empathy that these behaviors, the irritability, the isolation, the deep silence, are not signs of weakness of character or a lack of courage. On the contrary, they are extreme adaptations of a brain that survived the absolute. The brain is not broken. It is trying, in a desperate and biological way, to ensure that the trauma never happens again. But is there hope for a brain that has seen the worst of humanity? Modern science brings us a message of comfort through a wonderful concept called neuroplasticity. This means that our brain is not a rigid piece of plaster, but more like a forest or garden that can be replanted. Just as trauma had the power to shape the brain for survival, new experiences, safe human connections, and proper treatment have the power to create new paths. The brain has an incredible ability to reorganize itself and find new forms of balance. Although the memories of the partner lost in the war may never completely disappear, the crushing weight they carry can diminish. Over time, and with the right support, the constant alarm can begin to lower its volume, and the captain of the control room can resume command of the ship. Recovery is not about erasing the past, but about learning to build a present where the war is no longer the only voice the brain hears. When we look back at history and at veterans who faced conflicts like World War II, we need to see beyond the medals and uniforms. We must look at the invisible but deeply real impact that violence leaves on human biology. Seeing a partner die in combat is one of the most challenging events a mind can process, and understanding the mechanisms behind it helps us have more compassion and patience for those who carry this burden. The marks on the mind are as real as the scars on the skin, and recognizing this is the first step towards healing and true respect. If this dive into the neuroscience of trauma touched you in some way, or if you know stories of resilience that show the strength of the human mind, share them with us in the comments. Don't forget to like this video so more people can understand this human side of science, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring the mysteries and the beauty of our brain together. After all, understanding our pain is the shortest path to finding our strength. Until next time.